How's it going, everybody? One of the probably most awaited reworks has finally arrived with Jormungandr, and the timing of its release is probably a little unfortunate. The seasonal patch in general has had very mixed reviews, and that is putting it nicely. I'd say the overall outlook was rather negative, and sadly Jorm's rework is caught in the crossfire. I personally don't think this is a bad rework. A lot of issues we outlined in the testing grounds have gotten adjusted, and in a good way. Unlike with the dodge testing rounds, I actually felt listened to in George's case. The rework is strong, but it's not totally overbearing compared to Valkyrie, TND or the upcoming Lawbringer one. Will that opinion change if these others will eventually get nerfs? Yeah, maybe. But at the moment I don't quite get the outrage, and I personally think this is a pretty solid rework. But I'll go over the changes now and try to give a little bit of extra insight. I don't think I need to explain the stamina bullying is gone. I've explained dozens of times why it was bad design at its core, and everyone disagreeing won't change their opinion no matter what, so we'll simply leave it at that. So, what changed? There was a light spam fix. Chain lights are no longer undodgeable. I am personally very much against the removal of blue attacks, but oh well. Dodge attack away, we've clearly addressed that issue. I've also had the animations changed. Speed-wise, they are all still 500 ms. Then neutral heavies, all sides are 800 ms now, and damage has been adjusted downwards. We're looking at 22 for top and 20 for sides. These numbers do look quite low, and if it were up to me, I wouldn't complain if this was the new baseline we're going to adjust many others towards as well. But don't worry, George isn't lacking damage. One more property for these neutral heavies is obviously the hyper armor. It's rather late at 500 ms, but if it were any earlier, you'd be looking at another heavy on red scenario. If hyper armor is too good, people will complain to the utmost degree. But as you can see, it still has its uses. Heavy finishes remain unblockable and now all have the displacement property that includes top. Damage on them is also on the lower end with 24 for top and 22 for sides. All sides, well, and the top let you Wallsplat, which then confirms another neutral top heavy or chain zone, but more on that move later. Wallsplat distance has been increased according to the patch notes, but I'm not sure whether that was from the last testing grounds or from the previous live version. I'm assuming the latter. The displacement distance is something that will need close monitoring, similar to what we've had with Afira. She would get Wallsplats from insane distances, and it seems to be much more reasonable on George. But I hope Ubisoft keeps an eye on this. 42 to 44 damage per unblockable with a wall nearby isn't anything to scoff at, particularly since walls are common in dual maps, especially the smaller arena maps, and the same goes for points in Dominion maps. It's also one of the reasons why all heavy damage numbers went down. Getting 50 or 55 damage every single time here would be quite overtuned. The other move that has the potential for Wallsplats is the Guardbreak Heavy Venomous Sting. It's also got further animation adjustments since the initial testing round. Every side is confirmed. It's an 800 ms move that does 12 damage. Like I said, these can Wallsplat and confirm another top heavy, which makes it a 34 damage Wallsplat. Without a wall nearby, your go-to move is the Guardbreaker Light into another confirmed light for 22. Obviously, this doesn't give an execution, but since light parries are given out for free since the patch, nobody should ever be struggling to get an execution. Let's talk tier 1 feat real quick here, since it has the biggest impact for this punish, and the parry one we'll talk about in a second. Jotun Salve? Is it? No, doesn't matter. Well, that is a passive that heals Jormungandr for 4 HP every time they land a bash, which makes the Guardbreak punish a 26 damage health swing. Feats cannot be ignored, and very often they sadly are, and other times they are not. And in the end, there is always a huge debate what the actual damage number should be. It might feel shit in duels if a damage number is low, but if it's appropriate in duels, then a damage increase in feat can make it absolutely busted in the force modes. This is more a feat problem and not a damage number problem. One side loses here sadly, no way around it. But the other move you've been seeing in these clips here is the parry counter. It now does 16 direct damage and also procs the feat, so a 20 damage health swing on a heavy parry. It doesn't confirm a follow-up light, but acts as a chain starter, so you can immediately go for the unblockable or hyper armor zone. More bashes do exist. Jotun's Surge is the forward dodge bash now. The input changed to a dodge bash. It's a 500 ms bash with a 300 to 500 ms input window. Ignore the frame checks, apparently I'm just really bad at delaying. Other than that, there's nothing out of the ordinary here, it's your run-of-the-mill Legion kick variant. Except for one little thing. There is currently a way to hide the dodge startup. A guard switch into bash makes this one quite scary, at least for people that need the dodge startup as a cue to react. According to some of the top reaction guys, it is still reactable as long as you know what you're looking for in terms of animation. So take that as you will. The move has lost its ability to chain, but getting a guard break won't be easy as we're looking at a recovery of 700 ms overall. So as usual, you dodge attack, but you also don't delay, you just mindlessly buffer as you always do. And now finally for the new Inchain Bash. This is how you unbalance opponents now for the slam. It is accessible in chain from every move that counts as a chain starter. It is an 800 ms feintable bash. Feint window is as expected. The range is still abysmal. Sadly, nothing has changed here. You need to be right into someone's face to land it. Target swapping in the middle of a team fight will almost always result in you whiffing it. It has no forward movement whatsoever. Recovery wise, we are looking at 800 ms for GB, guard swap and dodge. Unlike your dodge bash, this one can indeed chain on whiff. It gets the usual whiff tax, and I somehow got a slightly slower chain link to the chain zone at 633, but it's 600 ms otherwise. What this means for you is that to get a guard break when dodging, you need to dodge early. Sitting there looking at the pretty orange and then dodging and guard breaking will most likely end with an unblockable in your face, or zone, or like even whatever. So decide how to punish according to your dodge timing. As usual, dodge attack is a safe bet even with the hyper armored zone. For that one to trade, you need to dodge late, delay the dodge attack, and then in this case here, like you can even trade zone for zone. But yeah, we'll talk about the zone in just a second. First, let's talk confirming this move real quick. I assume it would work like TND Valkyrie Shaolin's knockdown moves, but it does not. You can connect the Inchain Bash during hit stun and you will get a successful knockdown. That makes it similar to Centurion's knockdown punch. So I am not sure whether it's working as intended or whether it's bugged. It does follow third hit stun rule, so it's not anything totally busted, but it's also a lot easier to confirm than I expected. Next move, we're talking Slam. It has lost all of its old properties. That means the armor from the life version and the unblockable from the testing grounds. It is a naked move now. It's 1000 ms with not so great recoveries. And you will make it unsafe as well unless you follow up immediately after knocking someone down. The changed recoveries make this one frame neutral now. Damage is 30 and some say it is on the high end and it could come down, but the move is also really unsafe on a lot of levels. It can be easily peeled and punishing it is also not really complicated. It is really risky and committing to it requires the correct scenario to not eat more damage yourself. What you can do with multiple people around you is the extra new option, the Chain Zone. But one more thing, there's a funny interaction with projectiles. The slam seems to avoid them early on in the startup. It doesn't work against attacks, but projectiles might phase through you depending on the timing. But now, finally, the Chain Zone. I've thought about starting the whole video with the move, but oh well, here we are now. Inchain Zone that acts as a chain starter, meaning you have all options available after it. Unblockable attacks, bash, and so on. I've been advocating for this feature in the past, for years actually. I mean the Inchain Zone. I think more characters should have this feature, but suggesting something nowadays gets dismissed really quickly. So at the moment there are 4 heroes with the ability to use their zone attack in chain, and sometimes even get an additional property on it. Those are Raider, Jonhu, Nusha, and now Jormungandr. In Jorm's case, you do get a completely new move. It's not really comparable to the neutral zone at all. It is an 800 MS move that is feintable and has a hyper armor startup of 100 MS. Damage is 24. The hitbox of it is massive, which is great. The job of this move is to allow for safe trading and continuation of your chain in the middle of team fights. As I've explained, the bash is not a team fight tool. Your normal attacks are. And to keep chaining those, you need a tool to connect the 2 hit chains. And that is this one. We did complain about long chain links in the testing ground, and I can happily say that Ubisoft did adjust them. Some are still longer, like from finisher heavy back into the Chain Zone, we are looking at 466 MS here. But right back into the finisher, the chain link has been reduced to 300 MS now. This should allow for George to be a swinging menace in the middle of a team fight, hitting lots of people and displacing them with the finishes. All in all, a very strong move that will be the source of many spam complaints, especially because of the hyper armor startup. Speaking of, one more move of note, the forward dodge heavy. It got faster, it's 800 MS now. Damage came down accordingly, and the input window is 100 to 300 MS into the dodge. The early input allows you to use it similarly to an option select. It's not one by definition, but it'll make sense to the common mind of a For Honor player. You can avoid both feint to guard break as well as feint to light if you use it into a heavy, and that is because of the hyper armor startup. Since it's a faster move now, the armor kicks in sooner. It is a convenient way to get into your chains and deal 22 damage if you expect your opponent to not commit to the attack. Well, the video's been going on for a while now, let's leave it here. Running attack and so on, well, that was just a goofy addition without any real use, so not worth mentioning, I'd say. Like I said, I think it's a good rework that could be further tuned, but at the moment it is in a solid spot, and I'd want to see it used a bit more before crying for nerfs. Yeah, the infinite is obviously not ideal, but I expect it to get fixed soon. Maybe that'll also address the hitstone situation. We'll see. Having said that, I hope the video was helpful. Thanks for watching. Laters, everybody.